Before people argued about his music, they whispered about his mind. Late at night, radios across America played a song that felt uncomfortably familiar. A man afraid to sleep. A man checking over his shoulder. A man questioning his own thoughts. This was not entertainment. This was confession. Long before mental health became a headline, one voice described it with frightening clarity. Not from a therapist's chair, but from the middle of the street. That voice belonged to Bushwick Bill. To many, he was chaos wrapped in controversy. To others, he was the most honest mirror hip-hop ever held up to America. As a member of Ghetto Boys, he helped create a sound that forced listeners to confront fear, paranoia, and violence without filters. Critics called it dangerous. Fans called it real. But behind the music was a man deeply shaped by faith, trauma, and survival. A man who studied the Bible as intensely as he studied the streets. A man who died once, came back, and never spoke about life the same way again. This is not the story of shock value. It is the story of what happens when pain is left untreated, faith is tested, and truth is spoken too loudly for comfort. And the question is not why he scared people. The question is why so many recognized themselves in his fear. He was born fighting gravity. In December of 1966, Bushwick Bill entered the world through a traumatic birth that nearly killed both him and his mother. He would later say that survival was never accidental in his life. From the beginning, it felt earned. He was born in Kingston, Jamaica, into a large family struggling to stay afloat. Music surrounded him early, not as entertainment, but as a language of endurance. The neighborhood carried stories of resistance, rhythm, and violence all at once. Childhood did not offer safety. It offered awareness. When political unrest and street violence intensified, his family left Jamaica for the United States. Brooklyn became their new home. The move did not bring peace. It brought contrast. Cold streets, crowded apartments, parents working jobs that barely kept the lights on. New York in the 1970s did not raise children gently. Drugs flooded communities. Crime became routine. And for a boy barely over 3 feet tall, attention often came in the form of ridicule. He was bullied constantly, pushed, mocked, tested. But humiliation did not break him. It sharpened him. He learned to defend himself early. Not because he enjoyed violence, but because the world demanded response. Strength, he discovered, did not come from size. It came from presence, from refusing to disappear. Hip-hop was forming in real time around him. Block parties echoed through streets. Jamaican sound system culture collided with Bronx innovation. He danced before he rapped. He painted before he spoke. Graffiti trains carried voices of kids who felt unseen. He was one of them. Yet while many around him escaped through music alone, his mind searched for something else. Meaning, structure, answers. In school, he encountered a film about gang members turning to faith. The message stayed with him. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. But it planted a question he could not shake. Why did some people survive chaos while others were consumed by it? That question led him away from New York entirely. He enrolled in Bible college in Minnesota and approached Scripture with the same intensity he once brought to the streets. He studied deeply, graduated at the top of his class. Faith was not a phase. It was discipline, purpose, direction. For a time, his future looked nothing like hip-hop. He planned missionary work, community building, service. Then he visited family in Houston, and everything changed. Houston did not demand that he change. It allowed him to arrive as he was. The city moved differently from New York. Fewer crowds, slower nights, cars that spoke through bass before drivers ever said a word. For Bushwick Bill, it felt like room to breathe. He did not enter hip-hop chasing a microphone. He entered through presence, through movement, through energy. Inside a club owned by Jay Prince, he became known as the dancer who never disappeared into the background. Crowds watched him before they listened. When he was brought into Ghetto Boys, his role was modest. He was not meant to rap. He was meant to amplify others. But groups are living things. They change when the right personalities collide. That collision came when Scarface and Willie D joined. Together, they formed a balance that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. Houston hip-hop stopped asking for permission. What separated the group from others was not shock value. It was clarity. Their music did not invent fear. It described it. And when Bushwick began to rap, the effect was unsettling. His voice cut through tracks in a way listeners could not ignore. High, urgent, Exposed. He did not sound invincible. He sounded human. Albums like Grip It on that other level moved without industry approval. Independent sales proved something important. People were listening because they recognized the truth, not because radio told them to. When Rick Rubin entered the picture, the music sharpened. Horror imagery blended with real headlines. Critics reacted predictably. They called it violent, obscene, irresponsible. But when Bushwick spoke publicly, his tone surprised them. He was calm, thoughtful, intelligent. He explained that their music reflected the same violence Americans consumed nightly on television. The difference was honesty. Then came the song that quietly rewrote the conversation. Mind Playing Tricks on Me did not shout. It whispered. It spoke about paranoia, fear, and sleeplessness in plain language. Bushwick's verse sounded less like performance and more like confession. For listeners, it felt uncomfortably familiar. The song crossed boundaries Southern rap had never crossed before. Charts followed, but something else mattered more. Recognition. People who had never seen themselves in hip-hop suddenly did. At the height of success, Bushwick stood at a strange intersection. Faith still lived inside him. Fame pulled hard in the opposite direction. And between those forces, pressure grew. Because telling the truth does not always bring relief. Sometimes it brings collapse. Success did not quiet the noise in his head. It amplified it. By the early 1990s, the pressure surrounding Bushwick Bill had become constant. Touring, controversy, expectations, and beneath it all, unresolved trauma that no amount of applause could erase. He later admitted that depression followed him everywhere. Drugs and alcohol did not begin as rebellion. They began as coping, a way to slow the thoughts that never seemed to stop moving. On June 19, 1991, everything broke. What happened that night has been told in different ways, even by him. The details shifted. The truth did not. A gun went off. A bullet entered his right eye. His body fell to the floor. Emergency responders pronounced him dead. He was transported to the morgue, tagged, placed among bodies that would never wake up again. Time passed. Silence settled. Then, impossibly, he came back. He later described opening his eyes and seeing a toe tag attached to his body. Drawers closing. Cold air pressing against his skin. At first, he thought it was a dream. Then panic arrived. He moved. He screamed. He pulled himself upright. Doctors rushed in disbelief. He had been declared dead. Yet here he was, alive. The bullet remained lodged in his head. His eye was gone forever. But the physical damage was only part of what followed. Nightmares intensified. Faith felt distant. Questions about purpose grew heavier. Only weeks later, Ghetto Boys released We Can't Be Stopped. The album cover captured raw reality. A wounded man in a hospital bed pushed down a hallway. No symbolism. No distance. At the time, it shocked the world. Later, he said it hurt to look at. That image froze his most vulnerable moment forever. Then came Mind Playing Tricks on Me. The song did not glorify violence. It confessed fear, sleepless nights, paranoia, hallucinations. His verse felt like someone speaking from inside a locked mind. Listeners didn't hear performance. They heard recognition. The song reached heights Southern hip-hop had never seen. But success did not bring peace. Media scrutiny intensified. Politicians blamed lyrics for crimes. Lawsuits attempted to turn music into motive. He carried that weight publicly. Privately, the damage deepened. Surviving death did not heal him. It forced him to live with questions that had no easy answers. And for the first time, even faith felt tested. If death could not stop the pain, what could? America never quite knew where to place him. To critics, Bushwick Bill represented everything they feared about hip-hop. His voice sounded unstable. His lyrics felt dangerous. His image made easy headlines. In a country already uneasy about violence and race, he became a convenient symbol. News programs simplified his story. Politicians pointed to songs instead of systems. Courtrooms attempted to turn verses into evidence. In one notorious case, lawyers argued that Ghetto Boys' music had hypnotized teenagers into committing murder. It was an argument built on fear, not fact. What rarely made the news was context. That the same America condemning the music consumed violence nightly through television. That the paranoia he described was not fictional. That mental illness existed long before hip-hop gave it a voice. Outside the United States, reactions were noticeably different. International audiences often heard the music as social commentary. To them, It sounded less like provocation and more like documentation. A raw record of American life few were willing to admit. Inside hip-hop culture, respect grew with time. Artists began acknowledging something important. He spoke openly about anxiety and paranoia long before it was acceptable. He did not mask fear with bravado. He did not pretend strength where it did not exist. Yet his personal struggles never disappeared. Arrests, relapses, public incidents, faith followed by doubt, redemption followed by collapse. For many Americans, this made his story uncomfortable. Society prefers clean arcs. His life refused to offer one. When he publicly turned toward Christianity and removed profanity from his music, reactions split again. Some saw growth. Others saw contradiction. But for him, it was neither image nor strategy. It was survival. He believed his life depended on it. America often celebrates transformation only when it is quiet and respectable. His transformation was neither. By the time illness entered the conversation, judgment softened. Not because people suddenly understood him, but because time creates distance. And distance allows reflection. Slowly, the headlines faded. What remained was a human being. Flawed, brilliant, troubled, honest, and impossible to reduce to a stereotype. When the diagnosis came, it did not come with drama. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. No long warnings. No gentle timeline. For Bushwick Bill, it was simply another truth to face. He told the world calmly, almost matter of fact. He said he was not afraid. He had already crossed that line once before. Death, to him, was familiar territory. What followed was not a victory lap. It was reflection. Plans were discussed. A farewell tour was announced. Then reconsidered. He felt his illness was being turned into a spectacle, that his pain was becoming branding. And so he stepped away. One last act of control in a life where control was often hard to find. On June 9, 2019, he passed away at the age of 52. There were no shocking headlines this time. No controversy, just a quiet end. And in that quiet, his legacy became easier to understand. As a member of Ghetto Boys, he helped give Southern hip-hop its most uncomfortable honesty. He spoke about paranoia before mental health had language people respected. He exposed fear without asking for sympathy. He told the truth even when it made listeners uneasy. He was not consistent. He was not clean. He was not easy to admire. But he was real. His life reminds us that survival does not always look like success. That faith can exist alongside failure. That redemption is rarely linear. And that sometimes, the people who tell the truth most clearly are the ones who struggle the hardest to live with it. Today, artists speak openly about anxiety and trauma without realizing whose shoulders they stand on. Listeners still hear Mind playing tricks on me and feel something personal stir. That feeling has not aged. It has only waited. His story is not a warning. It is a mirror. If you remember where you were the first time you heard that song, share it. Did his music ever make you feel understood? Yes or no? Leave it below. And if stories like this matter to you, stay with us. We don't tell them to glorify pain. We tell them to remember the people who carried it, even when it nearly broke them.